So it has been a while since I've done one of these drowsy little rambles. So I thought I would do one tonight because I'm drowsy. Maybe it'll help you go to sleep. I hope. And the thing I thought I would talk about today is how to find a female dominant. It's a question that I've heard a lot over the years, and I was reminded of it because someone in the comments asked that. How do you go about finding a girl who is at least a little bit dominant? It's a really hard question to answer, but it's also a really important one if that is the kind of dynamic you're looking for. So I want to try to answer that as best as I can. Or at least point you in the right direction. So I'm going to give it a shot. So one thing to keep in mind is that you can't tell if someone is dominant by looking at them. A lot of people are outwardly maybe extroverted or forthright or aggressive in their day-to-day sort of public life and quite submissive in the bedroom. So you can't assume that you can just tell by the way someone behaves in public that they are sexually dominant. I am quite subdued in public. People typically wouldn't know that I like being dominant. And they certainly wouldn't know the ways in which I enjoy being dominant. Yeah, there's I don't think there's any particular tell. I mean, maybe come across when I get protective of somebody. It might signal something, but it's kind of it's sort of a running joke about how dominants tend to believe they can tell when someone's submissive. I do too. I also feel that I can tell when someone's submissive, so it goes. It's a lot easier if you're dominant to find somebody who's submissive than the other way around. That said, I don't know if it's if I've actually guessed if someone's submissive or if I've just made them submissive. I don't know. I could be totally wrong with that, but so with that in mind, that you can't really tell by looking at somebody if they're dominant. So that makes it tricky, right? I mean, it's not like there's like a bar or someplace you can go where everybody hangs out when they're dominant. I mean, there are like fetish communities online where you can just be very straightforward about what you want and hope to connect with a female dominant. But it's sort of a known thing that there are far more submissives than there are dominants, and especially female dominants. So even that might be kind of challenging. So I personally, it's 100% just personal belief. I personally believe that particularly women, might be very sexually dominant and not know it because they've never had the opportunity to explore that or experience it. Or they have been kind of raised to believe that it's very threatening to men to be proactive sexually, or that they've been kind of taught that to be really, 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 really sexy, that they need to just let the guy take control. And even though it's a very outdated belief, I think it's still present. I think it's still internalized through sort of subtext. So what I am going to recommend, sort of like to answer this question, what I'm going to recommend are ways of introducing femdom to someone you've met and you're starting to form a connection with. Ways that shouldn't be too intimidating. Because I feel like if you are submissive and you want to meet someone who is sexually dominant, I feel like the best way to increase your odds of that is by telling you how you can introduce it to somebody else. So, I'm really drowsy. So I think the first thing you should consider doing is to look to art and popular culture for examples of what turns you on. So that can be, it can be like an illustration or a meme or a graphic novel or a movie or a short story. Anything that shows the kind of dynamic that turns you on. And the reason why I'm suggesting that is because it's a lot easier for someone to grasp it when they can see it. And mediums like fiction or visual arts or film, all of that, they're all mediums of expression. And if you can show somebody what turns you on, they can then kind of put themselves they can kind of imagine what it would feel like for them. And I think that's important because you can sit someone down and tell them, I'm submissive and I want you to take control of my cock or something. They'll have no idea what that means. Or they might have something that comes to mind that is not even close to what you're thinking of. And I think something that just communicates that better, pretty much anything in any medium where you see that kind of relationship dynamic. So if it's just that you like a woman being dominant but caring, or if you're just really attracted to like femme fatale figures who are, sexy but might also kill you, that sort of thing. Anything that kind of captures the heart of what turns you on, I would collect those things. If it's like a scene in a movie, like make a note of it, write it down. Because when you meet somebody and you're getting to know them, and you start to share the things that you enjoy. This is a very good thing to share, like things that you like and excite you and turn you on. And you can also then talk about your kink through that art or that visual imagery or that fiction. You can talk about, say, like that story that you really, really like, and then also talk about what you like, so it's not so direct, so that should be less intimidating, but it's also a lot more accessible to the other person. It's less likely to make them feel like they're being put on the spot. And I think they will genuinely understand it better. And in a way that is coming from them rather than trying to mirror whatever it is that you like. Like, it gives them a chance to roll that thought in their own mind and see what they find exciting about it. And it might inspire something in them to try something like that with you, but have it come from them rather than you like scripting it for them. So that's the first thing I would recommend. The second thing is that when you're with somebody, and it gets to the point where things are sexual, and you might not like this advice, but you will need to tell them that you want them to take control. I see a lot of people say that because they're very tall or because they're very masculine or like conventionally masculine, that everybody assumes that they're dominant. And what I think is missing from that is that I don't think they realize that the woman they're with may well be assuming that they want to be dominant or they expect to be dominant. Particularly if that person they're with has been told that this is literally what men want, what men find sexy, is for a woman to kind of hang back and be just like a passive receiver, or to be like openly submissive or something. If that's what that woman has been told her whole life or has internalized, or even if that's just something that she does as a reflex to appease men, and this is a very common kind of like cultural issue in that a lot of women, as almost like as a defense mechanism, will just yield to whatever a guy wants, as almost as a matter of self-protection, because there is like a very legitimate fear that by being aggressive, the guy will find that threatening and he will be not such a great guy. And this is a real problem that exists and is out there. So it is not surprising if you're with somebody and if they don't know that you're submissive, that they're going to just assume that you will want to take the lead. So that means that if you find yourself in a sexual situation and you haven't told them by then that you're submissive, you're going to have to fucking say it. You're just going to have to say it. Like, I'm sorry. You're going to have to spell it out. That said, I think there are ways of doing that aren't too terrifying, because I 100% understand why you might not want to do that. It's putting a lot of cards on the table that exposes you to the possibility of rejection in a way that could be very painful. And I totally get that. So what comes to my mind, at least, is like a very easy way to do that, and a way that shouldn't be too shocking to anybody. Because I definitely don't recommend just saying, I'm submissive and I want you to peg me and choke me out. I don't recommend that. Like, I think all you really need to communicate is that you want them to take control. So one way to do that, and this is just the thing that always comes to my mind, is through really basic objectification, so sexual objectification. So you can do that by really just saying that it would really turn you on if they just used you to get off. They just like used your body to make themselves come. Because that completely flips whatever the sexual dynamic was before. If they were at any point thinking that you're the one who wants to be in control. And if you then say you want them to just fucking use your body to make themselves come, you're giving them permission to take control. And you're doing so in a way that doesn't require any knowledge or practice or planning or preparation or anything. It is, all they have to do is know how to masturbate, essentially. And do that, using your body or something. And while that kind of shift in thinking, depending on the person you're with, well, it might be kind of dramatic for them. It should be something that is pretty manageable, because, and it also doesn't scream femdom necessarily. As femdom can be very, very intimidating to people. So I recommend doing something like that. If that feels like a little too aggressive, you can also say that you want to watch them masturbate and then offer to go down on them. But I think anything kind of in that general ballpark where she is in control of the sex and has the opportunity to kind of experience what that feels like, I think that's what you want to aim for. And you want to do that fairly early on. If you're switched, then it's probably no big deal if you bring it up later. But if you are full-on submissive all the time, and it is really important to you, and you have a hard time pretending to be dominant, like you feel obligated to be dominant, but you hate that. If that's how you feel, then you got to do that day one, in the bedroom at least, because if you bring that up later, you've already had sex a few times, and during those times you've pretended to be dominant when it really is not your thing. It will make her feel like you've been dishonest. And when it comes to sex, you really don't want your partner to feel like you can't be trusted about something that intimate. I think trust is important, but it is really important when you're naked, So there's that. I think the third thing that I would recommend that you keep in the front of your mind is that when she does try being dominant, it's really, really important that you let her know how much it turns you on. positive reinforcement, because it'll, particularly if it feels unnatural to her, or if it runs counter to everything she's been taught about sex, then it is really critical that you really let her know that this is exactly the thing that gets you off, that gets you really, really excited. There's that. But also, your pleasure will give her pleasure. You want her to feel pleasure dominating you. You want her to access that feeling, to get a rush from it, and to feel excited by it, and then daydream about it and crave it, and then ideally start thinking of new ways to make it even more intense. Like, you want that kind of momentum going. So making it very clear that it turns you on so much you can hardly stand it. That will go a long way towards that. I think it's just, it's how, like, maybe in your head you're thinking, like, it shouldn't be about your pleasure or anything, but it is how these power dynamics work. That dominant gets pleasure from knowing how much the sub loves it. And anytime that isn't the case, if for any reason you're with somebody and they are dominant and they don't care about how much pleasure it gives you, and I'm not talking about the fantasy, like maybe that is the fantasy, that they are cold and cruel and don't give a shit about how you feel. Like, that could be like the role play, for example. That's fine. But fundamentally, like, say when that is over and you're going through like aftercare, your dominant absolutely must care how you feel. And if you don't get that sense, you need to get out, because that is not what I would call BDSM, and that is also not a healthy dynamic. So it is in a healthy dom-sub relationship. And I generally avoid generalizations, because, particularly with sex, because there are all different kinds of these things. But I think with this, pretty much a standard absolute that your dom absolutely cares how it makes you feel. And if it doesn't make you feel good, then that is not a good relationship, and you need to leave. So I'm sort of saying that, but I'm also saying that to sort of say that if you are developing this relationship with somebody and you are introducing them to female domination and you are encouraging that, then making it clear that it really turns you on will give them pleasure, will make them want to do it again. Like, you want them to feel as much pleasure as possible from doing this. And one of the reasons why I'm just mentioning that is because maybe it seems super obvious. I don't know. One of the reasons why I'm mentioning this is that I think when it comes down to that, when you're with somebody and you have kind of put yourself on the line a little bit by letting them know that you're submissive and that you want this kind of dynamic, I think you might be tempted to focused on yourself and how you feel and maybe the fear that you're feeling or anxiety. Like, you might be afraid that they are judging you or going to reject you or something. I could see how that might happen. But in those moments, the thing that you really need to be thinking about is how they're feeling. And if they are feeling overwhelmed or intimidated or like it's too much too soon, or I don't know, any number of things, it can shut them off of femdom for the long term. Like if they are having a lot of negative feelings during that time. And so it really is important to make sure that they know this is something that you like. You can do that through reassurance. But also just basic feedback that gives you a lot of pleasure. You do that enough, they'll feel that. And then it'll be a positive experience going forward. I'm sleepy. And so I think overall, I'll give you the short version of all of this. I think if you're submissive and you're looking for a female dominant, any dominant, but particularly a female dominant, that is very much in your best interest to be able to bring that out in somebody. I don't think whether someone is dominant or submissive is necessarily a fixed thing. It is for some people, but for a lot of people it isn't. I think there are ways to explore that. I think if you're able to bring that out in somebody, like, you may well meet somebody who is absolutely opposed to being dominant. I think that has less to do with domination and more to do with an aversion to trying things outside of their comfort zone. So I think on the whole, if you are submissive, as nice as it would be to think that you could meet somebody who is already an established, experienced dominant, who knows exactly what she wants and knows exactly what she needs in a submissive and is also capable of recognizing that in you. And while in a perfect world, it would be great if you could meet somebody that they would just know and you wouldn't have to do anything. And that your first sexual experience together would be like the perfect crystallization of every fantasy you've ever had. It is very unlikely to happen. It might happen, very unlikely though. So if it is something that you really genuinely want, I do believe that the best way you can aim for that is by being prepared to bring it out in somebody else. And you might, in doing that, you might sort of unlock that for them. It might be somebody who loves being dominant and just never knew, never tried it before. Or it could be somebody who can be dominant under certain circumstances, and this kind of will bring that out in them. It's possible they really are just like a hard no on that. I just absolutely do not like that. And that would be a case where you have not found a dominant. But I think that really is kind of the best way to find someone. If you're talking about a relationship, talking about something that will be there in the long term, sort of ongoing thing, I really think that the best way to do that is by connecting with somebody the way you would connect with anybody, and then introducing what you like to them. And they will either be open-minded and receptive to that, possibly even extremely into it, or it might just be a no for them. And if that's the case, that's okay. Yeah, just see how it plays out with the next person. But yeah, I think that's probably the best way that you can go with this. One thing I do, I just want to kind of throw out there before I pass out from sleepiness, is that if you meet somebody, say online, who said that they're dominant, and you have these conversations in advance, and their kinks are compatible with yours and all that, you do want to be a little bit cautious and remember that anybody can self-identify as dominant, but what that means to them might not be what it means to you. And there are people out there, it's just such a frustrating thing to acknowledge, but there are people out there who will use the language of BDSM to mask or justify what is actually abusive behavior. And the key distinction here, a key distinction that is you should always keep in mind, and I think this is true of all relationships actually. A dominant really cares about how you feel. They will check in with you. They will take care of you with aftercare. They will want to know for sure that this is okay, whatever kind of play that you're doing, that this is what you want. And even if they're doing like really aggressive, like edge play or degradation or humiliation, they still really care about how it makes you feel. It's a really big red flag if you think you found a dominant and you have played together a bit, is how attentive they are to how you feel, and also how you feel afterwards. Because while it's common to feel kind of a range of emotions, especially if you are submissive, but also feeling very conflicted about that, it's very common to be wrestling with a lot of feelings. If those feelings that you feel afterwards are, if it makes you feel like you've been broken down, or like if you feel like emotionally hurt and emotionally neglected, if you feel like you've done things that you're not comfortable with because the dominant pushed you to, if you have any of those kinds of feelings, this is not normal for a dom-sub relationship. This is a sign that you might be with somebody who is just using the term dominant to justify treating you in a way that is not right. So, so I just want to put that out there as sort of a reminder in case, because I worry sometimes that, if somebody is submissive and they've been looking for a very, very long time to find a dominant, and then they finally do. I'm worried that they might be inclined to overlook red flags that might suggest this person isn't really a dominant. This person is just abusive. Everything about BDSM is kind of the opposite of abuse. It is very much about consent and knowing what the other wants and being kind of attuned to each other, very closely attuned to each other. BDSM is never hurting somebody and then leaving them to deal with it on their own, or hurting someone as a form of manipulation, or jerking their emotions around. This is not, that is not what BDSM is. And so I just wanted to have that as sort of a heads up. Always feeling protective. You should always feel like, even if you're put through the emotional or psychological and sexual ringer, when it's over, you should always feel like euphoric, or like you've experienced a huge release, or excited, or calmed, and loved, and accepted, and understood. Those are the sort of feelings that you should be having. And if you feel like crushed, you just need to run. You just need to get the fuck out of there. I'm so tired now, I can hardly keep my eyes open. So that's my long, rambly answer to that question. And I hope something in that is useful to you. Because no doubt it's hard to find that sort of thing. Alright, I'm gonna go to sleep now. I hope you have a wonderful night. And I hope you have sweet dreams. And I hope you find that dominant you've always looked for.